March 1989, and a thunderous rumble is approaching the capital of Wales, Cardiff. After 2 years on the road, Motorhead are on the final lap of their rock and roll world tour, and they're about to finish their last Welsh gig of the 1980s with one almighty, unrepentant, chaotic bang. Yup, this was a bang so loud, let's just say it upset a few people. And a teenage me, so yeah, it's quite a few years ago, well, I was going to witness it firsthand. So the mighty Motorhead were in the unaccustomed position of touring off the back of an album that they'd released 2 years earlier. Certainly not the usual Motorhead way. The album Rock and Roll had been released on the label GWR and was distributed in the wake of Lemmy having a role in the British comedy troupe movie Eat the Rich. Motorhead had additionally supplied a number of tracks for the original movie soundtrack, including the main title song. The timely comedy connection didn't stop there either, as the album Rock and Roll had been recorded in a studio owned by none other than Monty Python legend Michael Palin, who also kindly lent his voice for one of the tracks on the album. It was essentially a parody blessing that included the glorious line,
"O Lord, thou who hast seen the trouserless and had compassion, look down upon them. Thank you."
Brilliant. And yet, despite all these wonderful, quirky sideshow moments, the band had unfortunately entered a legal dispute with GWR, and all because of a disagreement over the release of a proposed live single. So, not being able to release any more music until things with the label were settled, Motorhead kept doing what they did best: played live and played loud. St David's Hall opened in 1982 in the centre of the Welsh capital, Cardiff. A national concert hall and conference centre, the venue would host all manner of concert events. Throughout the 1980s, it quickly became the favoured location for any touring musical act. And this included many of the big names of rock and metal: Iron Maiden, U2, Metallica, Thin Lizzy, Motley Crue. In other words, as a concert venue, it had pretty much seen everything. Or had it. So a gang of teenagers, including me, enjoyed the wonderful hospitality of 1980s British Rail. Yeah, dusty seats, a miserable ticket conductor, and the occasional interruption from a squeaky catering trolley being pushed along by an arthritic dolly bird.
Hello, my love!
Not that any of that mattered, mind, when loaded up with a few flagons of cider. Cider, of course, being quite an easy and agreeable drink for the palate of an underage drinker. We arrived at Cardiff Central Station, excited, and well and truly under the influence. Back then, Cardiff was a little rough around the edges, but we knew our way to the centre, so avoided the dodgy areas. And we soon found ourselves among a growing crowd of fellow Motorhead bangers. And I guess it's worth pointing out, back in the 1980s, music was a really tribal thing. You see, music was not a cheap commodity like it is today. Kids would queue for hours on the street to get their hands on a latest music release. They invested their time, blood, sweat, tears, and money into buying their favourite music. Fans would pore over album sleeve artwork, scour text and photos printed on the inside sleeves, and once the vinyl was placed on a turntable, it was treated like some kind of holy grail moment. And it wasn't just about the music either. It was the fashion, the ideology of your favourite artist, and that yearning for being part of a particular tribe. So imagine my surprise when we were confronted by not your regular, let's say, heavy metal gig audience. These guys were there. And these guys were also there. And I'd never seen anything like it before. And amazingly, everyone was just mingling and having fun. I mean, skinheads and punks weren't supposed to be our friends. I mean, that's how tribal it was back then. And yet here we are, all at a Motorhead gig, and everyone was on the same page. Go figure. So there I was, right? Positioned right at the front, centre stage, pinned to the barrier because everybody's pushing from behind. Okay, so pinned up against my chest. And right in front of me is the mic stand of Mr. Lemmy Kilmister. Motorhead now being a four-piece outfit, Lemmy would always take the centre of the stage, unlike when the band was a trio. And I was ready to get my face melted away by pure Motorhead rock and roll.
You need some rock and roll!
And so my recollection of the gig is of incredibly fast, aggressive and, of course, loud Motorhead. Track after track being delivered with typical no-nonsense attitude. So as the gig goes on, directly in front of me, like that, there's a pile of cigarette butts growing. Because in between songs, Lemmy's having a cigarette, you know. And I suppose that's just his image, isn't it? I mean, it's just pure rock and roll swagger. I mean, you can't get much cooler than that, right? And of course, the occasional stage diver would make an appearance and then disappear again with limbs flailing everywhere. And, of course, I'm directly in front of Lemmy's mic stand. This meant I was saved from getting landed on and having a stray boot or knee in the face. The stage diving would tend to take place to the left or right near where Wurzel and Phil Campbell, the two guitarists, would be tearing it up. And at one point I do remember Lemmy going over to the one side and helping one of the stage divers off, very kindly, with a boot up his arse. So the gig was pretty much like every Motorhead gig in that respect, until whizzing through the air, kind of over my left shoulder, a piece of upholstery comes flying and lands, skids on the stage, and ends up kind of skidding along to the base of the Marshall stack. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. But the band didn't take any notice of it. Maybe they had seen it before, I don't know. But then a couple of minutes later, another piece of chair upholstery comes flying over my right shoulder and lands in between Wurzel and Lemmy, and pretty much just stops near Wurzel's feet. So something was going on. So I kind of craned my head upwards, because of course you can't look back because you're pinned up against the barrier. And the silhouette of a theatre armrest spins overhead, and I follow its trajectory in a space between Campbell and Lemmy. Again, Motorhead just kept on playing like they'd seen it all before. But it was obvious they weren't being targeted, because these objects, these missiles, were being thrown in the space where they weren't, which I suppose was all very respectful. So the gig continued, the missiles flew about, and the crowd was at fever pitch. And you could say that we were getting value for our money. Sat behind the drums, of course, in between a set of toms, I could see Phil Animal Taylor, setting the tempo with his thick stock shoulders, and his jawline was going intently, obviously chewing on gum or whatever. But it was just fantastic. Motorhead finished their set, the customary sound of feedback from Lemmy's bass being taken off, the band said their thank yous and walked off. And the St. David's Hall lights were switched back on. A mix of cigarette smoke and the remnants of pyro bangs just kind of hung in the air, and the stage was empty apart from these pieces of upholstery that had been chucked on. And as I shuffled back, feeling a bit shell-shocked from the intensity of the gig, I took in the scene of the theatre emptying out. Not exactly a battlefield, but yeah, it kind of felt like, you'd gone through the ringer a bit. In a nice way, of course. But it was just unbelievable. I'd been to St. David's Hall several times in the past. I had never actually seen it in this state before. So there were bits of chair, like armrests gone, or back parts of the back gone. And in fact, some of the chairs had actually been ripped off the floor, despite the fact that they'd actually been bolted down. And amazingly, despite all of the damage, you had the metalheads, the rockers, the punks, the skins. Everybody was just strolling out, chatting, laughing. There was no trouble. Everybody was in good spirits. So, yes, it was a wild time, but kind of good-natured fun, let's call it that. And meeting my mates outside, we headed home. But little did we know that all the fun and shenanigans had also been had at the St. David's Hall bar that was positioned on a higher tier in the theatre. Yeah, apparently a group of fun-loving Motorhead fans had, let's just say, got swept away with the motion and had thrown a few bottles and glasses around and created a bit of a mess. So Motorhead were promptly told don't come back, and St. David's Hall was to give them a lifetime ban. Never had the venue witnessed anything like it before, and to be fair, neither had I. And a mere year later, the band would play their first gig of the 1990s down the road in Newport, which for Pontypridd-based Phil Campbell meant a slightly longer drive down the M4. And as we all know, Lemmy was to relocate to LA, and Motorhead would continue for many years to come, with their aggressive fusion of heavy rock, rock and roll, punk rock, whatever you want to call it. And of course, a relentless touring schedule, playing live and playing louder than everyone else.